Today we are interviewing Dr. Mary Alice Hunt, who is Professor Emerita of Florida State University College of Information. We're very pleased that she's able to share with us the wonderful background of the college as it grew over the years. First of all, Dr. Hunt, what are some highlights of your professional career before becoming a professor at Florida State?
Well, I worked in a flower shop in Ocala, Florida during my high school years, and then I came in 1946 to FSU, and I started working as a student assistant. I've worked for FSU ever since until my retirement in '95.
Excellent. Also share some special events or activities that happened while you were teaching at FSU.
Well, let's see. We started teaching extension courses, and we covered the whole state, and even from one end to the other. I know they had some trouble scheduling off-campus courses back in the 50s, and they would schedule you in Pensacola 2 days and Miami the other 2. I did that several times. And you drove, so...
You know they didn't fly you?
Later they flew you, but...
Early on you drove?
You drove 200 miles to Pensacola, 200 miles back, ran in the house, grabbed another suitcase, 500 miles to Miami, 500 miles back. I was doing 1,400 miles a week.
It's a miracle you still are with us after all that. Also, I know one thing that happened. We had a special visitor from India while you were teaching at FSU.
What was his name now?
I know there was some interesting visitor we had from India while you were teaching.
Dr. Ranganathan, who was great on the colon classification system. And he came and spent several weeks there, but he stayed with Dean Shores at his house, and Mrs. Shores was always worried because he wore a suit coat and a sheet, and he dragged that sheet into the dust and the dirt, and so she was washing his sheet every night. And he was an interesting speaker, and he spoke to every class on different subjects, and we even had him speak outside of the school in one of the larger auditoriums because so many people wanted to see him and talk to him and knew about him.
Right. And also I remember you talking about a very large gathering of high officials in the military.
Yes, we had the first Strategic Air Command conference here, and they flew the librarians and the generals and the colonels in from all over the United States and from overseas. And I went out to the airport just to see the lineup of all the military planes. They came in, and I think there were 200 people all told. And we had Ruth Rockwood help plan that. And it was the first Strategic Air Command conference they had ever had in the United States. And Dr. Shores had engineered that and gotten it all put together.
Well, that really helped put the school on the map early on.
Yes, and they had several after that that they held.
What have you been doing since retirement?
I've been working at the Senior Center. I take 2 classes. I take watercolor and pastel drawing. And I'm having great fun with those. In fact, some of the techniques I taught in graphics class we use in watercolor and pastel class.
So you're keeping up those skills.
Yes, I still work on that.
Retirement. Well, some other special questions that would be unique for you are, why did you leave your previous job and come to FSU?
Well, as I said, I was working in a flower shop while I was in high school in Ocala. And I came to FSU, and I immediately got a job in the journalism department as a student assistant, and I've worked for FSU ever since, except for a break in 1951 In 52, I worked at the Tallahassee Democrat, the local newspaper in Tallahassee, for that period of time, and then I came back to FSU to get my master's. And the reason I got there from the newspaper, I went out to take pictures of Dr. Shores when he returned from his round-the-world trip, and I was sitting on his front porch talking to him, and he kept saying, well, you know, you really should go to library school and take courses. And 2 or 3 days later, he called me and offered me a graduate assistantship if I would start my master's. And so I resigned that day, and 2 weeks later I was in library school. I gave him 2 weeks notice at the newspaper. And I worked for Dean Shores in the office as a graduate assistant. And I also worked for Mr. Clapp at that time. He was the assistant dean.
Well, in the 70s, when I joined the faculty, you took a sabbatical 1 year, and
I went off to Indiana University to start work on my doctorate in library and information studies at the IU Graduate School, because you could not get a doctorate from FSU and continue to teach there. So I went off and started my doctorate.
right, and of course the impact on me was I ended up teaching children's literature
Yes.
for 1 solid year, which was not one of my major strengths.
Well, at that point in time, I was doing the graphics and advanced graphics and children's literature, and every now and then young adult literature. And then for a while, we had children's literature split into 2 courses. It had, you know, 415, 460. You remember that?
Beginning and advanced.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I remember. The next, if you could please share some differences, since you worked for all of the earlier deans, Dean Shores, Goldstein, and Summers.
And also Jane Robbins.
And Jane, oh, that's right, you also worked for Jane Robbins, I forgot.
I've worked for every dean except after my retirement.
Right.
Well, Dean Shores was the one that first hired me, and incidentally, I'm the only person living that was a faculty member out there and hired by Dean Shores. I'm the only one left. I looked at the old pictures the other day, and all of them are gone. But
that's why we want to record you as quick as possible.
yes, I'm pushing my 80th birthday next week. Dean Shores was the idea man. He had, you know, 100 ideas a week and thinking of things, and he would try them or start them, and then Mr. Clapp would either have to finish them or get them out of the way. But he was way ahead of his time on a lot of things. And he would have an idea to start a group or a club, the Journal of Library History he started. And he started the library history group in ALA. And, you know, he would think of something, or he was one that first used the term of the materials center, and the idea of the generic book, and he described a generic book as anything that gave you information. So he included computers, which was unusual back in the early 50s, and computer data and all of that, but books, magazines, films, film strips, anything that gave you information.